Popular Culture podcast where we talk about religion, popular culture, and everything in between. And today we're talking about food. I'm not going to have any lead up to it. I enjoy food and I want to talk about it.
Food is good.
I think we've been doing a lot of these kinds of pseudo introductory kind of podcasts in this season, and maybe going forward in other ones we'll get into a lot more of the nitty gritty. But I find that I think sometimes when you mention something, say like religion and cinema, or religion and food, or religion and I don't know, monsters, you know, some of the other things that we've talked about, they seem like they're really specific, but then once you start getting into it, you start realizing just how huge it is, and that it's like this whole discipline in and of itself, and there could be a whole podcast devoted to just that. So this is going to be another one of those. It's going to be a bit of an introductory thing, but then maybe later on down the line we can kind of dive into a much more specific element of it later on. So if as you're listening you find something that we've either skipped over or we didn't really spend a lot of time on, that's probably why, but shoot us a message and we'll look to cover it in a little bit more detail if there was something you wanted to hear a bit more about. But I kind of started wanting to do this episode because we've mentioned, I think, on 2 different episodes now, my idea of the Lord of the Rings and the levels of food consumption being linked to the different levels of corruption in the individuals. So just to do a quick overview of it, the elves are vegetarian and the orcs are... I was gonna say carnivores, but they're more than carnivores. They eat each other.
Yeah, cannibals.
They're cannibals. That's the word. And basically everybody is kind of slitted on that sliding scale of where they are on the level of corruptibility is also echoed in their level of what they eat and what they're interested in eating. And so I find that really fascinating. It was a really interesting aspect of Lord of the Rings that I think is a very subtle thing, but is a very interesting study. And it made me want to do a whole thing on food because I think religion and food is a really fascinating topic. It's really varied and you can approach it from a lot of different angles. So there's a couple of different things that I wanted to talk about in this episode, and we'll see if we can get through them all. If we don't, then we don't, and we'll tackle it later on. But one of the things is that when we're talking about pop culture, and it's in our title, we talk about pop culture in this podcast all the time. And when we say pop culture, it often calls up ideas of media. So thinking about, you know, say YouTube or the internet or TV shows or movies, this is what we think of when we talk about pop culture. But pop culture is also the culture around us that is inherently popular. And part of that is also things that aren't necessarily media focused. And this is where a lot of different food things also rests. And not to say that food isn't in media types. I mean, food is proliferating all over the place in media. There's food networks on television where it's an entire network of television dedicated to food all day, every day, all the time. And it never gets tiring for some reason. I don't know why, but it is. There's loads of different food channels on YouTube that aren't just here's how to cook something.
And there's different things they do with it as well. So it isn't always just a show that's like, you know, like a traditional cookery show. Today we're going to make a lovely pie. Here's how you do it step by step.
Yeah.
There's a surprising amount of variety of what they can do. Do you remember a show called Men vs. Food?
I do.
I always come back to that because firstly I think what a bizarre premise for a show. But it also really did show the pleasure that we can derive from copious amounts of food. Did you ever watch that show and thought I could do that?
Have you ever seen, it's an American one, so I don't know if it ever aired here, but it's called Cutthroat Kitchen.
I've heard of this, I've not seen it.
But yeah, so it's people competing and they'll like cook something really normal, but then they bid on like sabotages to throw the other people, so they have to like cook everything on a really tiny skillet or, you know, things like that. And it's a bit of fun. Whenever we don't have internet at the house, I have a hard drive that has like 11 or 12 seasons of Cutthroat Kitchen, and we just spend mornings watching Cutthroat Kitchen instead of YouTube. But yeah, there's like loads of different things like that also, not just on TV but also on YouTube. I am a big fan of a particular YouTube channel called Imamu's Room, which is like an ASMR-y watching someone just cook food in their house. And while it's been somewhat educational in like an, oh, let me try throwing that kind of a dish together, it's mostly just somewhat relaxing watching someone cook. So you get those kinds of things. Food hashtags are obviously a massive thing on the internet. Lots of people taking pictures of food. I don't know about you, Alan. My phone has a food setting on its camera.
Yes, mine does too. Which essentially blurs everything around the food.
It's so weird. I tend to not use it, but I find it... I do take pictures of my food, though.
What I find really weird about it is that the camera detects food.
Does it?
Yeah,
mine doesn't do that.
Mine says, oh, this is food. You need the food setting. In the same sense that when I take pictures of my cats now, it says, oh, this is a cat. And there's a cat. It's automatically created folders on my phone of foods and cats. One is called Furry Friends. I didn't call it that. And I think the other one's just called Food or something. But the camera has detected what I'm taking, which is somewhat scary, and has created folders for me. So yeah, food porn is very much a little industry in itself, isn't it?
I got really mad one time at a pop culture conference that I went to. And by pop culture conference, I mean a study of religion and popular culture of loads of academics in the study, and I went to one of their conferences. Not that I was just at some conference for people who enjoy pop culture. And
all of it.
Yeah, just all of it.
Of pop culture.
If you are interested in it, then go. But there was someone that did a thing on food porn, and they just made me angry. But it was, I don't remember who it was, so I don't feel too bad complaining about it. But in it, they were talking about Nigella Lawson. Now, Nigella Lawson is a very famous food presenter in the UK who is known for being incredibly attractive and for being incredibly sensual in the way that she presents.
I am aware.
I have seen a couple of her videos. She's also very good. She's very good at what she does.
She is very good. Yeah, and she's a lovely person as well.
Yeah, and she knows what she's doing. It's not that she is just accidentally attractive and sensual. She knows exactly what she's doing. She knows the kind of low-cut shirt to wear. She knows exactly how to pose herself. She knows what she's doing. But this person was kind of talking about basically how, oh, it's all just sex sells and it's not that much deeper than that. Which, it's that thing, though, of like, well, she's also very good at what she does, and she's very good at cooking. And one of my favorite things to complain about when people are talking about the kind of passive consumption in popular culture is to talk about Nigella. Because so many people have tried to replicate Nigella. So many people have tried to be like, well, I'm also an attractive woman with boobs. I can also do a food cooking show like this. And they just don't go as well. They don't do it as well. No. And it's not because they're not attractive. It's not because they're not sexy. It's because they're not Nigella. Yeah. That there's something about Nigella that people really connect with. It's a skill. More. Yeah. Yeah.
And what you were saying, with Nigella, the fact that she's known as Nigella, you know who you're talking about just from the first.
When I was writing a chapter where I was mentioning her, I had to look up her last name because I only knew her as Nigella.
She isn't just skilled at cooking; she is a skilled TV personality. Because getting people to feel engaged with you through a screen, I think, is actually a lot more difficult than people give it credit for. And maybe this is why some of these people are trying to do a Nigella but aren't succeeding, because there's a skill to being able to, even what you were saying, about cooking in such a sensual manner, you still have to make it. It's about the complete package, isn't it? It's about the skill of the cookery the way that she speaks, the way that she presents it, and there's something very relaxing about it as well.
Yeah, it's almost very ASMR-y,
And
but before that was a thing, really.
everything is filmed through this hazy filter as well. So where
Yeah.
she's cooking is always very, it feels warm. And that everything's a bit, the picture quality is just a little bit fuzzy, and the camera's always to her side. It's rarely ever face on, so she will always look up to the side. And it's all these little things that it's actually a lot more honed and crafted than people get, rather than just being like, oh yeah, she's being sexy with food. There's a craft to a Nigella show, and she has transformed the way of late that I pronounce microwave. Have you seen this?
No.
In a recent episode of her show, she put something in a microwave and she says, "I'm just going to leave it in the microwave for a few minutes." And I say it every time I use a microwave. I always mention the microwave. So if you're listening, Nigella, thank you.
Oh God, if Nigella is listening, I will die happy.
Yeah.
She was on an episode of there's an American show called Top Chef, which is very Master Chef but much more competitive, and it's all professional chefs that are trying to compete for it. It's a good show. I really enjoy it. But she was a guest judge on there, and it's hosted by Padma Lakshmi, who's also a very attractive woman. She was a model, very tall, very beautiful. So they decided to like team up in this like beauty off, and they had the chefs prepare them breakfast in a hotel, and both of the women were wearing bathrobes and were lying in bed to be served the food. And it was like they knew what they were doing. They're like playing up this thing, and she's playing up her personality of this sensual person.
Of course.
But it was great. It was one of my favorite episodes. But anyway, basically what we're saying is there's a lot in there with media in regards to food, that definitely media is important. But I didn't want to focus only on media, because I think that food itself is a part of popular culture. And it's November at the time of recording. Just started November. It's been pumpkin spice latte season for about a month or so now.
Gross.
And I think this is a good example of how a particular food item can become an inherent part of popular culture.
Indeed.
You can say hashtag PSL and people know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it's a moment as well when pumpkin spice latte is back. That first day, oh, it's back. You know that it's this time of year. You know that this particular event is approaching. And something that is now a hallmark of this event is this particular food or drink that you can now consume. Halloween is here. I don't drink pumpkin spice latte because...
You should.
Should I though? I
mean, as you know, and as I'm sure some listeners will know by now, I am basic. So I enjoy my pumpkin spice lattes, and I admit I get excited when I walk in September and they've got a big banner. I don't go to Starbucks, but they'll have it at like Costa or at even some local ones. They'll be like, "Oh, we got pumpkin spice lattes now as a seasonal thing." And I go, "Yay!" And I get really excited, and I have pumpkin muffins, and I go ham on the pumpkin everything. So, yes.
Well, do you.
I partake in that popular culture very readily and very excitedly. And it is because I remember when that was a new thing, when it wasn't a common thing that everyone everywhere had pumpkin spice lattes.
Oh yeah, this is very much a recent, particularly in the UK. I can't speak to America, but in the UK, it's very much a recent process.
I mean, it's been within my own lifetime, and as we've talked about multiple times, I'm very young, so it's it is incredibly recently that this has really spurned on, and it's such a part of popular culture that I do wonder if it's ever gonna ever go away, or if there is going to be something that will kind of take its place, or whether the idea of it being kind of associated with really basic things is going to, and people is going to kind of make it die out. But I mean, I think we can also have a whole podcast episode on the idea of basic, but that's, I think that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I was just thinking about how a British institution at the time of Christmas are the old pigs in blankets. And for anyone who may not be familiar with the concept of a pig in blanket, it's a sausage wrapped in bacon. And Brits take it incredibly seriously at Christmas time. And I think I've mentioned on this show before that I'm on a plant-based diet and have been for a couple of years. Because, you know, part of the reason why you do it is so you can tell people and lord it over them as superiority. But I was just thinking about the fact that last year, my wife excitedly texted me a few days before Christmas that she was in a supermarket and she had discovered vegan pigs in blankets. So vegan sausage wrapped in vegan bacon. And she said, "Oh my gosh, look what I found." And my instant response was, buy as many of those as you can humanly carry and we'll have them over Christmas. Throughout the rest of the year, I can take or leave pigs or blankets. Pigs in blankets. It's not something that, but it's that element of, oh, it's Christmas. And if I don't have this particular food at Christmas, then Christmas is ruined.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different, like, weird food cultures in Britain versus even just, like, America, who we obviously share quite a lot of other cultural elements, but the food was, I think, the hardest thing for me coming over, of learning the different language for different things, but then also learning what was present and what wasn't present. And you don't have graham crackers, which has boggled my mind for ages.
What are you referring to?
They're like, I don't even know how to. They're like a digestive.
Okay.
But they're more like crackery than a digestive.
Okay. I don't think I've ever had something like that before.
Yeah, you don't have it.
Oh, so right. So it's not that we've got it, but under a different name.
No, it doesn't exist. Okay. It does not exist in the UK.
It's just totally abstract.
And most like recipes for like cakes and stuff, or like cheesecakes, they'll use a graham cracker base in America. And I could not find graham crackers, and I kept going, oh well, maybe they're just not, like, they're in a different section, maybe they're just called something different. And so when I started dating my now husband, I was asking about graham crackers, and he was like, I don't understand what you're on about. And then I was like, well, but do you have s'mores? Because for us, when you make a s'more, you use graham crackers.
Now you're gonna have to tell me what a s'more is.
This is what I learned. Is that you guys don't really have s'mores, which are, you have 2 graham crackers, and then you put chocolate, like, in between, and then you roast a marshmallow, typically at a campfire, and then you put that in between it, and you make a little sandwich.
Is this what Buzz Lightyear refers to at the beginning of Toy Story 2?
I would have to rewatch Toy Story 2.
He tells Woody that he and Andy are going to be making delicious hot schmoes, and Woody says they're called s'mores.
Yeah.
S'mores.
So this is, and it's such a normal thing. And when I found out that he had no idea, like, this was a thing, and he didn't really know what I was talking about, and I said, well, then what do you eat when you go camping?
We don't camp.
Because it's such a basic of, if you are outdoors around a fire, you are making s'mores. It is so much part of a thing that you do in America that I had no conception of. How do you go camping, or how do you sit around a campfire? How do you sit around a fire outside in your back garden and not have s'mores?
I feel like America a lot of the time is a lot more sweet than savoury compared to Britain. So if a Brit was to go camping, they would be roasting meat. And it would just be meat. It would be roasting sausages.
I mean, you do both.
Yeah, you could do both, but I cannot picture a British person roasting something sweet.
You do both. But that's what I mean, like, but you stick it on a stick. It's like what you do as a kid. It's like this whole thing, and it was this whole cultural thing that I had no idea until fairly recently. was a difference. And I still find the differences, and it's always food related whenever I'm finding a difference. But it really goes to show how much food is a part of our kind of common culture, that even our campground culture is inherently different based off of whether or not you have graham crackers. And I wanted to tell a little bit of a history story because Alan, you are UK based. You have grown up in the UK.
Specifically Wales, yes.
Specifically Wales.
Welsh, not British.
I didn't say
Hashtag.
England. And I grew up in the US. How knowledgeable are you of grape juice?
Oh, gosh. Not at all.
This is such an interesting factor of food history that is inherently tied to religion, and this is why I wanted to talk about it. So in America, grape juice is very common. You get grape juice everywhere. You can find grape juice. There's giant containers of grape juice. Kids drink grape juice. It's very common to find grape juice. Not here. I mean, you can find it, but you have to kind of look for it. It's not as common. You're going to be more likely to pick up apple juice than grape juice.
Yes. I've drunk my fair share of apple juice.
Yeah, but say not that they don't have apple juice in the US, they definitely do. But grape juice is probably about just as common as apple juice in the US. And this is because of prohibition in the US.
Okay.
So obviously, prohibition in the US was led by a lot of very religious people, Christian religious people. And one of the problems that they faced was that while they could sit there and say that no one should be allowed to have alcohol, churches have alcohol. Churches have alcohol as in the form of wine during communion.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the question was, how do you allow for prohibition to continue and not give people excuses to drink alcohol while also still maintaining your ability to take communion?
Mm-hmm.
And so they started making grape juice.
Okay.
And Welch's is an American company. It's a huge American company now, but it was started in Prohibition by a guy named Welch who created a way of producing grape juice that was unfermented for Prohibition and for churches.
Okay, that's really interesting.
So grape juice has become incredibly integral in United States culture because of the history of Prohibition, and particularly because of the history of Prohibition in relation to churches, which does not exist in the UK. And I found this whole saga really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And when I learned about it when I was doing my undergrad, and it was kind of a footnote level of thing. It was like a paragraph or in a footnote, and I was so taken by this because I find it's such a small thing to think about in relation to the importance of an aspect of culture, but it's so impacted by the intersections of popular culture and religion. And it's because of that our entire food choices for generations afterwards has been affected. So I thought that was a really fun example of just where religion and food intersects. As a good example. But yeah, I found that fascinating. And I still look for grape juice here every once in a while just to help re-solidify my...
Yeah, for food conventions are just really interesting in themselves, aren't they?
Yeah.
Why do you guys...
So when we talk about... Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was going on a complete tangent. You keep going.
So when we talk about where religion and food intersects, there's a lot of different ways to talk about this. And one of them is kind of what we were already a little bit talking about when we were talking about your pigs and blankets in the UK, and which is that food for big ceremonial, mostly religious events is incredibly connected. Thinking about your what you eat for Christmas dinner, for example, is and this was something that we discovered when I was newly married and we were doing Christmas for the first time as a couple, is learning, oh, that's what you do and that's so inherent for you, but then mine is completely different, and you have to figure out how to marry the two and not have anyone feel like their own view of Christmas is getting stamped on. And of course, my husband's not even that religious, but it's still impacted by this religious history and, you know, how that impacts culture and your own understanding of it. Eid is another big example of a big feast day that is, you know, it's very much about the food and very much about the rituals around the food and when you're allowed to eat versus when you're not allowed to eat, and how much this ceremony itself dictates food.
And similarly, Passover's use of food is very symbolic.
Yeah.
With specific foods to remind people of specific instances or to conjure certain feelings through the taste.
Yeah. When Sikhism, so in the Sikh temple, you typically eat all together. And it's a big important part of it. And a lot of it was because originally people were segmented because of caste or because of religious or because of gender. And it was a marker in their own kind of communal understanding of, no, all of those markers are gone. All of those social distinctions are gone. We eat together as a collective. And so just that simple act of eating together was actually a huge ideological stance that was based on their own religious views. So, yeah, I mean, food, the way that people connect to food in these rituals are incredibly important and show a lot about these different understandings. And they can be for big events, but they can also be for kind of much smaller events. So in a previous episode, I talked about how in my earlier part of my childhood, I was forced to grow up Christian. And after a Sunday service, there was always a big potluck, and everyone would bring a small thing, and it would be under a gazebo in the, you know, parking lot of the church. And we'd sit around and talk together and be sharing all of this food. And it was every single Sunday. And it was the best part of going to the church because I like food.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also the element of the pleasure that food brings.
Yeah.
So it's the partaking in something enjoyable.
You know, to kind of break down the fourth wall a little bit, we recorded 2 episodes today, so this is our second episode that we're recording today. Our previous episode that we recorded was on the religious function of cinema. And in that, I had mentioned about not really liking the communal thing of going to the cinema. And as we are just now talking, I am realizing that the communal action of food is more of where I would align myself.
Yeah, you definitely resonate with
give me a huge potluck any day over a trip to the cinema. That's my religion.
Yeah, absolutely. That is really interesting, isn't it? And I'm similar. Whenever I meet with friends, it's always over food. I'm not let's go to the pub and have a couple of pints guy. Sometimes if it's during the day, it'll be coffee. But if it's in the evening, I don't suggest go into a club or whatever. It's always, let's have dinner. Let's go somewhere for dinner, or come round and we'll cook you dinner. Because I enjoy the interaction of speaking to someone whilst eating.
Yeah.
Whilst sharing in a meal. We really should try and get our friend Graham Harvey to come and discuss some of his stuff on this show in the future.
He's got a great book called Food, Sex, and Strangers, which is also one of the best titles that I think I've ever seen in religious studies. Yes,
it's definitely the best title for an academic book in religious studies, for sure. But yes, food is it's such a it connects people in a very interesting way, and I think that's why it's such a you see it as such a distinctive part of something like Eid or Christmas or Passover and so forth, because people need to eat, and therefore that's something they can all do together.
Yeah. And food is obviously used in rituals as well. I've always found it weird that in Christianity you eat the body of Christ. It always felt very cannibalistic to me, but
That's very Catholic. Well, the process of
well, yeah.
transubstantiation is obviously very Catholic. Um, but yes, the symbolic eating of the body and the drinking of the blood. It's
Yeah.
but it's one of those aspects that I think I always come back to as a scholar of new religions who often gets told by people that, you know, these religions I'm studying are really weird and really strange. But I think if you take a step back and look at something like transubstantiation or the process of communion, if that wasn't so ingrained in your culture and you were so familiar with it from such a young age, that would look really weird to you if a new
To
religious
be
movement started doing
fair,
it.
to be fair, a lot of people who are hateful of Catholics tend to use transubstantiation as a reason.
Mm.
Because there is a very strange thing in a lot of Christian groups where it's almost better to be not Christian than to be Catholic, for particularly a lot of Protestants and Protestant views. Their kind of hatred of Catholics is a bit intense.
Yes, yes. There's a lot of history there,
Yeah.
but yeah, absolutely.
I remember a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, her family is very religious for a Protestant form of Christianity. And they found out that I was Buddhist and were very like, oh, well, you know, but she's a nice person, who cares, kind of a thing.
Hmm.
And they actually said, well, as long as she's not Catholic. So it was actually better for her, for their daughter to, in their minds, to be hanging out with someone who wasn't Christian than it was to be hanging out with a Catholic. And of course, I elected not to tell them that my family is in fact Catholic, but
Yeah.
we just decided not to mention that part. But I just found that really fascinating that it was better for them to for me to be completely different than just slightly different. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. I wanted to make sure that we at least footnoted the fact that we are aware that there is the view of the weirdness of Catholicism is definitely present. And,
Yes. Yes, it is. And of course, there's weirdness everywhere, as we always come back to, making
yes.
the familiar strange.
Yeah. But I think that this also kind of brings up a really another important point, which is kind of loosely connected to religion, but in the sense that religion impacts every view and understanding that we have, which is that there's a lot of intersections between food and morality. And there's one side of this, which is the more kind of contemporary thing that keeps popping up of plant-based diets and veganism as a morality choice. And how that can impact someone's understanding of their own religious ideas and their own views of what is moral and therefore what would lead them to make certain choices about what food they eat. But there's also a certain other aspect of morality with food that doesn't get talked about a lot, which is how we actually get our food. And this also has a certain impact with religion, not only just based off of where we draw our moral grounds, but also on where we draw the lines of us versus others that allows certain moralities to, say, maybe not be paid as much attention in certain mindsets. A lot of secular countries, or quote-unquote secular countries, I should say, like the US, like the UK, like to think of the fact that religion is not impacting their laws.
Sorry, the thought of the US and the UK being a secular country.
You know,
Yeah.
I have taught students before who I've had to argue this with. And, yeah, anyway, so in these kinds of secular countries, I think a lot of people like to think that religion is not impacting our laws, but Perhaps maybe more so lately will be a little bit more understanding that that is happening. And that is also happening when it comes to food consumptions and what we're allowing certain companies to get away with versus what we're not allowing certain companies to get away with. Nestle is one of the most horrendous companies. I won't get into everything because it's a lot, and it would be a whole different podcast if I started listing them out. But basically, their morality is very questionable, and so my husband has made a decision along with his family of our morality as, you know, with how we view the world does not match up with what this company is doing, and so we boycott everything Nestle. And when I was starting to date him, that was also part of it. And even though I knew a lot of the horrendous things, I didn't really boycott because I never thought it would really matter that much. But it is something that's very important to other people, and you have to learn kind of where to go with it. And I've also learned a lot more about Nestle since then. So, you know, those kinds of things as well, of where we draw certain lines and what certain companies are able to get away with due to their alignments with certain things. And the fact that a lot of the terrible things that Nestle's doing, for example, is in Africa, I think is a very obvious separation of us versus them that Indeed. Is able to happen because of certain understandings that is ideological and social and therefore impacted by and impacted with religion. Sorry, this is gonna get I wanted to end on something happy, but I think that this is a really important thing to mention, and then maybe we can talk about something a bit happier kind of near the end. But when I was an undergrad, I actually took a class on religion and food, and I was expecting it to be a lot more about, you know, Eid and what you eat for Eid and what a kosher law is and things like that. And it ended up being a lot about this stuff. It ended up being a lot about aspects of GMO. It ended up being a lot about the laws around food. It was a lot about treatment of immigrant workers who are picking food, because that's actually where a lot of the impact is being actually levied. And you know, it's an important thing to talk about.
Of course. Absolutely.
So we should probably end with something happy. As I said, this was obviously very, very overview. And I could probably have spent a lot of time going into each one of these sections. And even, hell, we could have an entire episode on Nigella. I mean, it's we could really dig deep into every single thing that we mentioned. And if there's anything that we've mentioned that you would want us to spend a whole episode on, please do get in touch. You can talk to us on Twitter. You can talk to us on our email. You can send us an email at incidentalmythology.com. incidentalmythology@gmail.com. There's also a contact form on the Incidental Mythology website, so you can get in touch in either of those ways in order to let us know what it is that you want to hear from, and let us know. So I'm really sorry for the very quick overview, but maybe we could finish on a little bit of a happier note before we read an email from one of our listeners. And that is, Aled, what is your favorite food?
Ooh, I can give you a very quick answer to this because I recently said a few days ago that if I could only eat one meal for the rest of my life, it would be pizza. Because there's no
Fair.
such thing. I know it's a cliche, but there's no such thing as bad pizza. Even bad pizza is good. So you're never going to be disappointed. I have never had a pizza that's so... I've had some bad pizza, but it's still been good pizza. Would you agree?
Sure.
Because it's so difficult to mess pizza up. Who can really mess pizza up?
I mean, we have pizza every Friday. We do homemade pizza. And that's also the one time in the week that we're supposed to have a dessert, but we always end up caving and having dessert on other days as well. But, you know, we try. I would go sweet because I'm American, as you have pointed out. And I would probably say a cheesecake. Ooh. Or maybe just a normal cake. I love cake.
Cheesecake is good. I do like cheesecake, and obviously I love chocolate cake. It's
Oh, so a
chocolate.
chocolate cheesecake would be like your ideal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But not on my pizza.
Now, I have made a dessert pizza before.
Have you? What was that like?
We did a Nutella base,
Mm-hmm.
and then we did. I had made homemade jam, so we put some homemade raspberry jam on it, and then Tom made a crumble, and then we baked that, and it was really good.
Good. That does sound nice.
I mean, the dough itself wasn't sweet because I just made the bulk dough for the savory pizza as well, but I think it helped to have it not be sweet, so it meant that it wasn't too much.
Yeah, sometimes when you're cooking something sweet, you have to be very careful that it doesn't become too sickly.
Yeah.
I like food that is just sweet enough that I feel that if I didn't get full, I could just continuously eat it. I don't like it when I get to the point where I think, okay, this is too sweet now. I need to put it down because it means I'm not eating, and I'm sad.
It means I have to put it down.
Yeah, exactly.
So we had a question from a listener that was about The Good Place, which is on Netflix. Basically asking if we've seen The Good Place, and if we did, what are our thoughts on it? So, Aled, do you want to start?
Yes, I loved it. I think it's worth saying off the bat that I think The Good Place, in my opinion, is the best TV ending I've ever seen. I have never seen a TV end with such a nicely tied up ending where everything felt so fulfilling and right. And on the same note, the ending of The Good Place raised a series of questions that I did not expect it to raise in terms of um, morality and the existential question of the afterlife and what the afterlife would entail. What I really love about The Good Place is that it's not necessarily a show about religion, it is a show that uses religion. And I think there's a subtle difference there. It uses religious ideas to drive a storyline. Ultimately, I think The Good Place is a show about morality. So particularly with the character of Chidi, who is the neurotic PhD student that we can all identify with, who brings in the moral philosophy side of his research, and he bounces it off Eleanor, who's very much an everyday person and a very practical person. And I think the show then really unpacks some quite complicated philosophical ideas in a really digestible way that doesn't talk down to an audience, but still makes something incredibly engaging. And in that sense, so I think it's playing with religious ideas, it's playing with moral ideas. It's not a show that has any intention, or at least to the best of my knowledge, to convert someone. And, you know, the idea of the afterlife in it, the idea of the divine, the angels, the demons, and so on, they're not Christian. In fact, they say, I think there's a line in the show that, you know, every religion guessed about 5% right, or something like that, and only one person had got it spot on. So it's not identifying with any particular religion that we would find in our um, in our empirical world, so to speak. So it's playing with those ideas. How about you, Vivian? Sorry, I've rambled for a while. Have you seen?
No, you're fine. I have seen most of it. I actually haven't seen the last season. We started kind of falling off of it, like 1 or 2 seasons in. It was one of those where I kind of wanted it to end at the end of season 1, essentially. And then it kind of kept going, and I didn't really know where it was going or feel like I was compelled to find out. So we actually stopped watching it.
Well, I'm glad that I haven't said how it ends now, because I think the ending is fantastic.
Yeah, maybe really we should go back and give it another try.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed what I saw of a lot of it, and I think that you're right in the sense that it talked a lot about morality, and in that sense was talking about a lot of the religious understandings without being kind of necessarily naming them or you know, doing it more directly. And I mean, it kind of ties a little bit into what we were talking about, the levels of morality in relation to like the food laws and the way that people actually get it. Because one of the bits that I remember from the later seasons was when they were talking about they pulled up somebody who had been sent to the good place in the past, and then pulled up a comparable person, and it was, so they had gotten a certain number of points because they had gotten flowers for their mother one day. And then it showed it on the more contemporary side, and it was that they got those points for giving the mother the flowers, but then it had all of the subtractions from things like the fact that they were therefore supporting a business that was doing this thing bad, and then the delivery company was doing this other thing, and then, you know, the way that they gathered the flowers was negative. And so how complicated it is to live in a world where you have to navigate all of those. And that essentially there is really there's no moral company.
Yeah.
It's very anti-capitalist, I think, in a lot of senses.
It
very
much is. It very much is, and it's very forward thinking with all of its morality as well, which I really appreciate. I think it's very much the sort of comedy that appeals to our generation, millennials and so forth.
Yeah.
I think some of the humor would not particularly resonate with certain audiences for that, but yeah, that's why I really liked it. We watched it after we started watching it the week after the final episode out. So
right.
We did the entire thing over the course of a week, which I think helps.
I think so, because we watched, I think, the first 2 seasons, and then that was when we had caught up. And so then we had to keep waiting, and I think we fell off around season 3 or 4 because it was like, well, I mean, it's already been a bit. I don't really remember what was happening.
Yeah, it's a very fast-moving show as well. So I think it does work because they even make a point of dividing it into chapters, don't they?
I think so. Yeah.
So everything is a continuation of the previous episode. They're not really standalone episodes, and that's a trend I think we're seeing now in the Netflix and binging generation anyway, is the days of standalone monster of the week episodes that you kind of had with like Star Trek Next Generation or early Buffy the Vampire Slayer is now dying down and giving way to a more coherent narrative that runs through an entire season, because there's a good chance somebody will watch an entire season in an evening.
I think it's a bit of a shame. I quite like Monster of the Week type TV shows. In fact, when we first started watching Lupin on Netflix, we thought it was going to be a Heist of the Week type show. And it's not. It's a one cohesive narrative that kind of ties it all through. And it's a good show. I don't want to like... I quite enjoy it. But it wasn't what I was expecting. And I watch TV while I work, and I've lately been going through Charmed from like the 90s, 2000s, and because Amazon just put it up on Prime, so I've been watching through it, and that's very Monster of the Week, and it's very nice. It's nice to have on while I'm doing something else. It's nice to have and like occasionally go, ooh, wonder what they're gonna do in order to solve this problem while I'm typing up a book proposal, like. It's very relaxing in that sense, where it doesn't feel so high-paced that I have to, I don't know, constantly be on edge to watch it. It's like I can just enjoy a TV show for the sake of enjoying a TV show. So, I don't know. I would like a Monster of the Week type to come back at some point, but... I don't know. That was a bit of a sidetrack, sorry.
Yeah, it's I think we've discussed this before in our other podcast. What's interesting about, you know, the different ways that we now watch shows is going to have an impact on the way the show is made.
Yeah.
Because you don't have that 1 week. You know, part of what works with Monster of the Week is that they take for granted that you may have forgotten a lot of the details of the previous week. But if you're binging something on Netflix that's been put up all in one season, in one go, then chances are you've only just watched the previous episode, maybe even a few seconds ago. I do quite like a narrative that runs through a show, but I do see what you mean about the perks.
I mean, I'm not saying that every single TV show should go back to the Monster of a Week format, but I would like that to be at least slightly more available.
Yeah, I agree. But yes, Good Place is good, and you should definitely go back and finish it, or probably start it from the start, maybe.
Yeah, maybe I'll go through and watch it at some point. Because it might be good to do an episode on it maybe in the future.
There's only a handful of episodes per season. It's not like a 24 episode season thing.
Maybe we could even do a kind of like what we did with Star Trek, where we kind of take a particular episode or something and really do a deep dive on it.
That'd be quite fun.
So maybe we'll do that in the future.
Yeah, and I would like us to also do an episode on Midnight Mass.
Okay, sure.
Maybe get our friend Paul to come on and discuss it. I know he's recently seen it.
Oh, is he watching it? I need to watch it. We were going to watch it around for Halloween, but Tom wasn't interested, so I've got to watch it now on my own.
Well, I saw on Twitter that he said he wasn't sure whether he liked it or not.
Oh, that'd be fun to get him on then.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So why not?
We'll try. If people want to talk to you about Midnight Mass or what they think about food or whether or not they agree with your vegan-based diet, where can they go?
Well, if you want to talk to me about food and Midnight Mass, you can find me on Twitter. If you don't like my vegan-based diet, you can go away. I'm joking, of course. No, everyone is welcome to speak to me on Twitter. Obviously, it's fun. So yeah, come and join me at @JLL Thomas, and we can have a good old chinwag. And what about you, Vivian? Where could they find you?
They can find me on Twitter. I'm at Viviana Simos, and Instagram under the same handle, at Viviana Simos. And you can go to our website, incidentalmythology.com, which is where this podcast is being hosted from. It's also got loads of other things on religion and popular culture. So if you like this...
There's more where it came from.
And you can tell that I'm not vegan by the fact that I don't mention it all the time.
Well, see, you're missing out. You're missing out. So...
Well, thank you for joining me and talking to me about food, and not being too self-righteous about it all.
No. I just have to bear the cross of being the morally superior host of this show. And, you know, it is what it is.
With that note, bye!
Bye, folks.